A poor girl showed up to the interview without shoes, and unexpectedly, the Millionaire CEO chose her out of the 25 candidates. There are moments in life when everything feels like it's teetering on a knife's edge. For a young woman named Leah, that moment was happening right now, in real time, on a Tuesday morning that felt a whole lot like catastrophe. Leah's life was, in a word, empty. Her bank account was a flat line. Her fridge was a tomb of expired hope, and the eviction notice taped to her front door was a constant, glaring reminder that time was up. The only thing she had left was a final, desperate sliver to chance, an interview at Sterling and Knox, a name so prestigious it felt like a mirage. This wasn't just a job interview. It was a Hail Mary pass for her entire future. She had to be there. She had to be perfect. But, as it always seems to go, fate had other plans. She was already late, running to the concrete jungle, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She dodged morning commuters with the desperate energy of someone whose life depended on it. She clutched her worn portfolio, her eyes fixed on her phone's GPS, the glowing blue seeming to mock her as it moved so agonizingly slow. Every stride, every jostle, every passing second was a tick of the doomsday clock. This wasn't just about punctuality. It was about survival. Lost in her panicked rush, she rounded a corner and, with a sickening thud, collided head-on with a man. Her entire world seemed to explode. Her portfolio went flying, paper scattering across the grimy sidewalk like fallen leaves. Her purse burst open, its meager contents, a few coins, a tube of chapstick, a single hair tie, spilling everywhere. But the worst part, the truly catastrophic part, was the sickening crack she heard from her foot. She looked down. The heel of her last decent shoe, a black pump she'd saved for months to buy, was snapped clean off. It lay on the ground like a broken promise. Humiliation and fury, a molten cocktail of emotion, surged through her veins. This immaculate, perfectly dressed man stood over her, his expression utterly blank. No apology, no hint of concern, nothing. He just stared, as if she were an inconvenience to his perfect morning. In that moment, he wasn't a person to her. He was a monument to everything she wasn't, wealthy, privileged, and completely untouched by the chaos of her life. She looked him dead in the eye, her voice a low growl of pure frustration. "Are you kidding me? You arrogant, heartless rich guy. You just ruined everything." The man said nothing, just gave her a dismissive look, adjusted his tie, and walked away without so much as a glance back. Leah was left alone on the sidewalk, the remnants of her last hope scattered around her feet. For a second, a single, devastating second, she considered giving up. She could just walk away, go home, sink into the inevitable. But then, a stubborn fire ignited deep within her. No, she wasn't going to quit. Not now, not ever. With a renewed sense of purpose, she ripped off her other shoe and flung both into a nearby trash can. The cold, hard reality of the city sidewalk shocked her. The rough asphalt and gritty concrete felt alien and unforgiving against her bare feet. Every step was a tiny jolt, a sharp reminder of her vulnerability. People stared, their gazes lingering with a mixture of pity and judgment. But she kept going. The stares were nothing compared to the desperation gnawing at her soul. She ran, her bare feet a defiant rhythm on the unforgiving pavement, her mind focused on one thing, getting to that interview. She finally arrived at the Sterling and Knox building, a towering monument of glass and steel that seemed to scrape the sky. The lobby was a symphony of luxury, polished marble floors, high ceilings, and a hushed, reverent quiet. Every candidate waiting was a study in perfection, dressed impeccably, exuding an effortless confidence she could only dream of. And then there was Leah, barefoot, hair mess, a smear of dirt on her cheek from a fall. Her heart pounded, a drumbeat of shame and anxiety, as her bare feet made an almost comically loud sound against the gleaming floor. She felt exposed, a total imposter. This was it, the moment of truth. You know, it takes hundreds of hours of research, writing, and editing to bring these true stories to life. If you're enjoying Leah's journey and want to hear more powerful tales of kindness and unexpected triumph, please consider hitting that subscribe button and ringing the notification bell. It's the single best way to support the channel and ensure we can keep telling these incredible stories. In this moment, with your shoes broken and the interview on the line, what would you have done? Would you have turned around? Or would you have kept going like Leah? She took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the receptionist's desk. As she stepped forward, the shame and embarrassment were almost crippling. But then, a voice cut through her panic. It was a receptionist, and she was saying something unexpected. And so, Leah found herself in a pristine conference room, a collection of perfect strangers in perfectly tailored suits. The other candidates sat like statues, their faces masks of calm competence. She, meanwhile, was acutely aware of the cold, polished marble beneath her bare feet. The silence in the room was a heavy, suffocating thing, broken only by the quiet hum of the air conditioning. Every minute that ticked by felt like an hour. Then, the main doors to the conference room swung open. A hush fell over the room. Everyone rose to their feet as a man walked in, and Leah's heart, which had been a frantic bird in her chest for days, simply stopped. It was him, the man from the street, the arrogant, immaculately dressed guy who walked away without a second glance. The one she had called an arrogant, heartless rich guy. He was the CEO, Derek Sterling. A cruel, ironic twist of fate. Her mind raced, 1,000 panic thoughts crashing into one another. The man who had unknowingly ruined her last pair of shoes was now holding the key to her entire future. The power dynamic wasn't just shifted. It was a total collapse. She had gone from the defiant, furious woman on the street to a vulnerable, exposed candidate in his office, completely at his mercy. He didn't make eye contact, not at first. His gaze swept over the room, a cool assessment of the candidates before him. He spoke in a voice that was calm and composed, but held a subtle weight of authority. He laid out the job description, the expectations, the mission of the company. It was all a blur to Leah. She couldn't focus on his words, only on the fact that he was the same man she had cursed out less than an hour ago. He moved around the table, stopping to ask each candidate a single, pointed question. One was asked about their biggest failure, another about their greatest ambition. Each candidate responded with a practiced, polished answer, the kind you find in a corporate how-to guide. They were all perfect, all prepared. Then he stood in front of Leah. The silence in the room became even more profound. The other candidates shifted in their seats, casting quick, judgmental glances at her bare feet. He didn't ask about her resume. He didn't ask about her skills. He simply looked down at her feet and said, "I think you have a better story than the rest of them. Let's hear it. Why are you barefoot in my office?" And in that moment, with nothing left to lose, Leah decided to do something completely and utterly insane. She chose honesty, with her head held high. She looked him dead in the eye and began to speak. She didn't hold anything back. She described the frantic run, the collision, the spilled purse, and the broken heel. She even admitted to her furious outburst, the insult she had hurled at him. She described the desperation of throwing her last decent shoes in the trash and running the rest of the way, the pain of the cold, hard pavement against her skin. She didn't apologize, and she didn't try to make a flimsy excuse. She simply told the unvarnished, brutal truth. A few of the other candidates gasped. She could feel their judgment, their shock that she would be so candid, so unprofessional. But Derek Sterling simply listened, a faint, almost imperceptible hint of a smile at the corner of his lips. He looked at her for a long moment after she finished speaking. It was the longest, most suspenseful silence of Leah's entire life. Then he looked at the rest of the candidates and back at her. "I'm looking for a personal assistant, not a robot. I'm looking for someone who can think on their feet, someone who has resilience, and someone with a whole lot of character. You, miss." Leah have all three. Then he said the 4 words that changed her life forever. "You're hired. Start tomorrow." The silence that followed was deafening. The perfect candidates were stunned, their faces a mixture of disbelief and quiet fury. A few of them began to gather their belongings, a bitter resentment radiating from them. They had done everything right. They had worn the right clothes, given the right answers, and yet the job went to a young woman with bare feet and a whole lot of nerve. Blair's honesty was her winning ticket. But do you think it was a risk worth taking? What would you have done in her position? Would you have lied to save face or told the truth and risked everything? Stepping out of the conference room and into the grand lobby of Sterling and Knox felt like stepping into a new life. The shame she felt just moments before was replaced by a wave of pure, unadulterated euphoria. It was real. She had done it. Her first few days on the job were a whirlwind of new things. She was given a corner office with a view of the city. Her desk was a sleek, modern masterpiece. She got a brand new laptop and a schedule that was so full of meetings and appointments it made her head spin. The awe of her new surroundings was constant. The relief was a warm, comforting blanket she wrapped herself in every morning. But as the initial shock and awe began to fade, a new, more subtle reality set in. The whispers. They followed her like a shadow. People in the break room would stop talking the moment she walked in. She'd catch a coworker's eye, and they'd quickly look away, a look of contempt flashing in their eyes. She knew what they were thinking. Who is she? Why her? Then there was Rebecca. Rebecca was a senior manager, a woman who had worked at Sterling and Knox for a decade and had her eyes firmly set on the personal assistant role. She was impeccably dressed, flawlessly professional, and had a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Rebecca saw Leah as an unpolished, undeserving threat, and she made her feelings known in the quietest, most subtle ways. She'd give Leah a smile and a perfectly pleasant good morning, but it was always followed by a small, undermining comment. Things like, "Oh, you're not in the main calendar yet? I'm surprised you haven't figured that out." Or, "I'll be sure to spell everything out for you. I know how things can be difficult for newer hires." Leah found herself walking on eggshells, constantly on the defensive. Her new job, which had been her last hope, was quickly becoming a new kind of hell. The office wasn't a place of triumph. It was a battlefield. And Rebecca was just getting started. One morning, Leah arrived at her desk to find a single, white envelope waiting for her. Inside was a crisp, new pair of high heels, a small, passive-aggressive note attached that read, "I thought you could use these. Wouldn't want you to fall behind." Little did Leah know this was only the first shot fired. The battle for her place at Sterling and Knox had just begun. The thing about street smarts is that they can't be taught in a business school. They can't be learned from a textbook. And for Leah, they were the single most valuable asset she brought to the hallowed halls of Sterling and Knox. She didn't solve problems the way a well-trained corporate assistant would. She solved them the way she had always had to, by being resourceful, by seeing things from a different angle, and by finding solutions in the most unlikely of places. A crucial client portfolio, thought to be lost in the vast company server, was found because Leah knew to check the temporary cache folder. A last-minute catering emergency was averted because she knew the best food trucks in the area. And when Derek needed to get across town for a meeting with a traffic jam threatening to make him late, Leah didn't panic. She simply pulled up her phone, navigated a maze of side streets and back alleys she knew by heart, and got him there with 10 minutes to spare. Derek had hired her for her character, but he was quickly learning that her real-world grit was worth its weight in gold. But this was all just a warm-up for the main event. A crucial board meeting was coming up, and Derek wanted a new proposal to present. He told Leah he wanted something fresh, something from outside the typical corporate echo chamber. There was only one problem. Leah had been so swamped with her daily duties, so buried under the avalanche of paperwork, that she hadn't had a single moment to put together a professional-looking presentation. She couldn't show up with a pristine slide deck. She had nothing. All she had was an idea. A simple, radical idea born from a completely unexpected conversation. The morning of a meeting, the tension was a living, breathing thing. The boardroom was a mausoleum of mahogany and glass, filled with executives whose faces held the permanent stamp of power. They sat in judgment, their expressions a mix of skepticism and impatience. They wanted to see a PowerPoint. They wanted to see numbers and graphs. And then Derek introduced Leah. A few of the board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They looked at her, then at each other with a silent, universal question. Who is this girl? Leah walked to the front of the room, her hands shaking, her stomach in knots. She stood in front of the massive projection screen that sat dark and empty, and she found a whiteboard. She picked up a dry erase marker, took a deep breath, and began to speak. Her voice, at first, was a little unsteady. She told him her idea didn't come from market research or a consulting firm. It came from a conversation with a delivery driver she'd met in the lobby. He had told her about a logistical nightmare with a major product, a problem that had to do with last-mile delivery and damaged goods. As she spoke, she sketched out a simple diagram on a whiteboard, a new, localized distribution model, a simple change that could cut costs by millions and drastically improve customer satisfaction. It was an idea they'd never considered, because they were too busy looking at spreadsheets and profit margins to talk to people who were actually in the trenches. At first, they scoffed. A few snickered under their breath. But as Leah kept talking, her voice growing more confident with every line she drew, something shifted. Her simple sketch made sense. The logic was undeniable. The numbers were right. Slowly, the skepticism on their faces was replaced by something else. Recognition. One of the oldest board members, a grizzled veteran who hadn't smiled in a decade, leaned forward, a look of genuine admiration in his eyes. He said nothing, but a subtle nod was all Leah needed. She had done it. Her idea came from an unexpected place, a conversation with a delivery driver. Where do you find your best ideas? Have you ever had a moment where an unlikely source gave you the perfect solution? The win at the board meeting was a moment of pure, unbridled triumph. But with every victory, Rebecca's hatred seemed to grow. She saw Leah's success not as a sign of her competence, but as a direct threat, and she decided it was time to move from subtle sabotage to all-out war. The attacks escalated. Leah would sit down at her computer and find a crucial project file had been inexplicably deleted from the shared drive. A last-minute email from Rebecca would give her the wrong address for a lunch meeting, making Leah show up late to a crucial client lunch. And the rumors, they became a poison seeping through the office. Whispers in the break room turned into a lie that Leah had a history of stealing from her previous employers, a fabrication designed to ruin her reputation. Leah was starting to feel the pressure. Her victory in the boardroom was no longer a moment of triumph. It was a target on her back. She felt isolated, the joy of the job replaced by a constant state of hypervigilance. She worked longer hours, often late into the night, just to stay one step ahead of Rebecca's attacks. One evening, long after the office had gone quiet, Leah was still at her desk, double-checking a crucial report. Derek was in his office, working late as well. She was so focused on her work that she jumped when she heard his voice. "You know, you're the only person I've ever seen who actually enjoys being here after 8 p.m. She laughed, a tired, weary sound. "It's either this or going back to my empty fridge." He nodded, a flicker of something in his eyes. He walked to the window, looking out at the glittering lights of the city. "I know what that's like." She looked at him, surprised. The cold, perfectly composed CEO from the conference room was gone. For a moment, he just looked like a regular person, worn down by the day. She decided to open up. "My mom used to say that. She was sick for a long time. She had cancer. She always said that when you have nothing, you have to find a way to make something out of it. She taught me to look for the good, even when there was nothing." He was silent for a long moment, his back to her. He was still looking out at the city lights. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet she almost didn't hear him. "My dad had it, too. He was a lot like her. Tough, never complained. I watched him go through it, and he taught me the same thing." In that single, shared moment of quiet vulnerability, something shifted. It wasn't about a broken heel or a job interview or a whiteboard presentation anymore. It was about something human and raw and deeply painful that they both understood. The chasm between the CEO and the barefoot assistant suddenly vanished, replaced by a profound, shared sense of loss. For the first time since that first day, Leah didn't feel like an imposter. She felt seen. And in Derek's eyes, she saw not just a boss, but a person. But as they stood there, two strangers connected by a shared past, they had no idea that a much larger, more dangerous threat was waiting for them. Rebecca had been watching them from the shadows, and she was about to make her final, devastating move. Rebecca sat in her office, a look of malicious satisfaction on her face. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, a final, victorious touch on the document she was about to send. The negative report she had been working on was a masterpiece of deception. It was a fabricated list of Leah's supposed failures, missed deadlines, improper communication, a general lack of professionalism. Rebecca had woven together half-truths and outright lies, all designed to make Leah seem incompetent and unreliable. She attached the report to an email and sent it directly to Derek. This is it, she thought. This is how I get her fired. A few minutes later, Leah's phone rang. It was Derek. His voice was calm, but there was a certain weight to it. Could you come to my office, please? And bring Rebecca with you. Leah's heart sank. She knew. She had no proof, but she knew. Rebecca's smile when she walked into the office was all the confirmation she needed. Leah's mind raced, a frantic search for the right words to defend herself. But nothing came. She felt completely exposed, a raw nerve waiting to be struck. They walked into Derek's office. He was standing behind his desk, a single sheet of paper in his hand. It was a report. "Have a seat, ladies," he said, his voice flat. Rebecca sat down with a confident, almost triumphant air. Leah took her seat slowly, her body tense, bracing for the worst. Derek looked at Leah first, a long, quiet gaze that seemed to see right through her. Then he turned to Rebecca. "This report you submitted," he said, holding up the paper. "It's a complete lie, isn't it?" Rebecca's confident smile faltered for a second. "What? Sir, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm simply documenting." "You're documenting your jealousy," he cut in, his voice hardening. "You're documenting your frustration that Leah, a person with no pretense, no artifice, got this job instead of you. You fabricated this entire document to try and get her fired." The air went still. Rebecca's face was a mask of shock and fury. "You can't prove that." "I don't need to," Derek said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "I know Leah. I've seen her work. I've seen her think. I've seen her solve problems with a level of ingenuity that a dozen perfectly polished, career-driven managers couldn't match. She's not perfect. She's human. She's unconventional. And that, Rebecca, is exactly what this company needs. She is not a cog in the machine. She is the wild card. And I trust her completely." He walked over the door and opened it. "You have exactly 1 hour to clear out your desk. You're fired." The silence that followed was deafening. Leah sat there, stunned, her heart doing a slow, triumphant beat in her chest. She had been so afraid, so certain of her failure. But Derek had defended her. He had believed in her. When she looked up, he gave her a small, knowing smile. He wasn't just a boss anymore. He was her ally. In a high-stakes moment, Blair used her personality to save the day. What do you think is more important for a career, a polished professional persona or genuine authenticity? The win at the office was followed quickly by a new challenge, a business trip to New York. The goal was to secure a massive contract with one of the most difficult clients in the country, a seasoned executive named Ms. Chun. New York was a city of controlled chaos. The energy hummed in the air, a high-octane symphony of ambition and power. But the meeting felt like a cold, empty room in the middle of it all. Ms. Chun was a formidable woman with a reputation for being ruthless. She sat across from them, her face an unreadable mask as Derek went through his perfectly prepared pitch. The slides were pristine. The numbers were flawless. The pitch was, by all accounts, perfect, but it was also hollow. Leah watched as Miss Chen's eyes glazed over. She could see the moment the client checked out. The pitch wasn't connecting. It was just another polished presentation in a long line of polished presentations. The cold, sterile words weren't reaching her. The contract was slipping away. Without thinking, Leah spoke up. "Miss Chun, if you don't mind me asking," she started, her voice a little shaky. Derek shot her a look of pure panic. This wasn't in the script. "Yes," Ms. Chun said, a flicker of irritation in her eyes. "I was just thinking about your first ever job. I bet you had a boss who was so particular about something completely ridiculous. My first job was at a coffee shop, and my boss was obsessed with the lid on the whipped cream dispenser. Said it had to be a perfect seal every time, or it would ruin the texture. I never got it right." The room went still. Derek looked at her, baffled. Miss Chen's unreadable face, it cracked. A faint smile touched the corner of her lips. I had a boss who was obsessed with the way the filing cabinets were organized, Miss Chen said, a low chuckle in her voice. He said if the documents weren't perfectly aligned, it would throw off the energy of the entire office. The tension in the room broke. Leah had connected with her. She hadn't used a single business term or a single number. She had used a shared human experience. The rest of the meeting was a breeze. They spoke from the heart, not from a script. They talked about the passion behind their work, not just the profit. The contrast between the cold, sterile pitch and Leah's warm, authentic story was stark. By the end, Miss Chen was not just a client. She was an ally. The contract was theirs. The business part of the trip was over. But the emotional climax was just beginning, due to a booking error. The hotel only had one suite available. A very awkward, very intimate suite. The air was thick with a new kind of tension, the kind that had nothing to do with deadlines or contracts. They both tried to fill the silence. They talked about the meeting, the contract, the flight home. But every word felt like a distraction from the undeniable, palpable electricity between them. They were no longer a boss and his assistant, no longer a pair of professional colleagues. They were two people, alone in a room, with a past they had overcome and a future they were both afraid to face. Derek walked a window, and Leah followed, the silence finally becoming too much. He turned to her, and the words stopped. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His eyes, for the first time, were completely open, completely vulnerable. He reached out, not to touch her, but to close the small space between them. His hand moved toward her face, and as he got closer, their bodies seemed to move on their own accord. Their eyes locked, and they were so close now, so close they could feel each other's breath. And for a moment, just a single suspended moment in time, it felt like the entire universe was holding its breath. He leaned in, and as his lips came closer to hers, a look of almost painful anticipation on his face, a sudden noise from the street below shattered the moment. A blare of a horn, a siren screaming past. He pulled back, a look of something unsaid, something unacknowledged in his eyes. He cleared his throat and walked over to the other side of the room. But the space between them was now filled with 1,000 unsaid words and an undeniable, powerful feeling. He was right about one thing. She was the wild card. But he was about to learn that she had a lot more than just professional challenges ahead of her. After that night in New York, the unsaid words between Leah and Derek became the foundation of their new reality. The tension didn't go away. It simply transformed into a quiet, beautiful understanding. The first date wasn't so much a date as a natural extension of their late-night conversations. They started small with a quiet dinner, and from there, their story simply wonderfully unfolded. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The narrator's voice can flash forward to a series of moments, each one a brushstroke on the canvas of their new life. There was the company Christmas party. They walked in, not as the CEO and his assistant, but as a unit. They were the center of attention, the subject of 100 curious stares, but they didn't care. They were together, a silent understanding passing between them as they laughed, talked, and danced. There were the quiet evenings. The professional suits were traded for comfortable clothes. The grand office was traded for a cozy kitchen. The intense business discussions were traded for shared silences and the simple, happy chaos of cooking together. He learned how to cook her favorite pasta, and she learned how to navigate his world, not as an employee, but as his partner. Then there was a vacation. They escaped the city and traveled to Thailand, to a quiet little beach town where the world was made of sunlight and warm ocean water. It was there, away from all the noise and all the expectations, that their relationship deepened into something solid and true. It was there, on a private stretch of sand, that he asked her to marry him. There was no grand spectacle, no huge public display. It was just a quiet moment between two people who had finally found home in each other. The wedding, when it came, was perfect. It wasn't in a grand cathedral or luxurious ballroom. It was on a beach, the warm sand soft beneath their feet. Leah, once barefoot on the cold, unforgiving city concrete, was now barefoot on the warm, soft sand, a quiet sense of peace filling her heart. She was marrying the man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and chosen her anyway. The man who had believed in her when no one else would. The man who had walked away without a second glance on the street, only to spend the rest of his life looking at her. The moral of this story isn't about a high-powered CEO or a life-changing job. It's about how the universe, in its strange and beautiful way, can bring you exactly where you need to be. The final scene. It's quiet. Derek is sitting in the living room of their home, looking at old photos. Leah walks in, a soft smile on her face. She sits next to him, takes his hand, and places it on her stomach. He looks at her, a question in his eyes. "We're having a baby," she says, her voice full of a gentle joy. His face, that perfectly composed mask he wears in the boardroom, crumbles. A look of pure, overwhelming happiness washes over him. He pulls her into his arms and holds her close, a single tear running down his cheek. They are no longer a CEO and his assistant, no longer a couple. They are a family. Their life, once so structured and separate, has now become a beautiful, happy chaos. Blair's story reminds us that life's most beautiful moments often come from the most chaotic beginnings. It's a testament to the idea that authenticity, resilience, and a little bit of unexpected chaos can lead you to exactly where you're meant to be. We all face moments where we feel out of place and unprepared, but those moments can be the key that unlocks a new, incredible path. What's one moment in your life that didn't go as planned, but turned out to be a blessing in disguise? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10.